what were you feeling in that moment? Was there coherence of what was going on, like, or?
Yeah, it was remarkable. So when I dove into the water, there's the click and the heat, as I mentioned, and then my body just goes limp, and I'm face down in the water. And the irony of the situation hits you, because I was the best trained of all of the lads on the beach to deal with that scenario. What you don't often hear told is that one of my best friends dove into the water at the same time, and his cheek brushed off the sandbank that I hit. So there could have been two of us.
Wow.
And it was ultimately him that pulled me out of the water. Now, there was a period when he thought I was playing and joking and playing dead, sort of a thing. And in that time, I had no awareness that there was anyone around that could help. And I'm face down in the water, and time kind of slows down. And
This is it.
Yeah, but time slows down a little bit. And I knew exactly what had happened. I knew that I had a certain amount of time before oxygen would run out, and just your natural response is you breathe in, and that would be water. And that's ultimately what happened. But luckily, I didn't take on enough that I drowned. But your mind does go to places, and at the time, I remember thinking about my parents and my two younger sisters and the dog at home and the lads on the beach, and you wonder, would they get to you? And if they didn't, how would they deal with that? And then luckily I was taken out of the water, and I told the lads on the beach, I've damaged my neck. I think I might be paralysed. And they're like, you've got a stinger, you'll be all right. As we're waiting for the paramedics to arrive. And I was like, no, like, my breathing is declining. I understand what this means. And so there was the very real awareness of the potential implications of this. But there's that, and then there's, I was air ambulanced away. I remember my friends standing at the end of the ambulance that brought me to the helipad, and them not knowing where I was going, me not knowing where I was going, me being strapped to a spinal board with my head held in place and my neck stabilized and all of this, and my breathing was declining, and I couldn't get a breath in. And as the swelling went up my spinal cord, the control of my intercostal muscles that help you to breathe in and out, and my diaphragm that pulls your lungs down, that was all dissipating, the control of those, and I couldn't get a breath in, and I couldn't cry out for help. And that was when I got scared, because I felt very alone in that moment. And waking up in intensive care, I still remember counting the 8 screws in the light fitting above my head. You're clawing for things because you're sort of, I suppose, groggy from pain medication and so on, and you're fighting for things that are real. And it's like, well, I can see that above me. And I remember counting the 8 screws, and I remember very vividly my parents coming in. I remember my mates coming in at different periods, and the fear on their faces, and me nearly putting them at ease. I couldn't speak, so we developed this way of kind of predictive texting. One of them would stand on each side of the bed, and one would be in charge of consonants and the other in charge of vowels, and we'd figure out like what I was trying to say. And then we had a letter board that they would point to the letters, and I remember it taking me about half an hour one day to say, this is the Portuguese alphabet. It doesn't have certain letters that we use in English. And I couldn't say certain words because of that, and the frustration.
Oh, God.
But, I was completely helpless. Like, when I got back to Ireland, I was in the Mater, and I had double pneumonia. Both my lungs, one was partially collapsed, and I had lost voluntary control of breathing, and so I had double pneumonia anyway. And the infection was quite bad, and I was hallucinating and the sweating, and I remember being the royal wedding, one of the royal weddings was on, and me lying in bed hallucinating and watching this and thinking, sure, where else would you watch the royal wedding? Like, this is the most normal thing in the world. Um, and so you're going from that kind of sort of dystopian reality that you find yourself in, to the absolute vulnerability of it later that week, in the middle of the night. Like, one of the things that comes with a spinal injury is you no longer sweat or shiver below your level of injury.
I didn't know that.
The autonomic nervous system is affected in quite a number of ways. And so, like, really, in some way, a lot of the body systems below your level of injury are affected.
Yeah.
So that means that I have like all sorts of secondary considerations aside from the lack of movement is kind of the easier part to deal with,
Okay.
in any spinal injury. And I just remember had this infection and I had a blanket over me that was filled with cool water that was being pumped through to regulate my temperature because I was so hot. And the only noise that I could make was a clicking, sort of gagging noise. And I remember it was the middle of the night and I was so hot. It was just unbearable. And I was on the ventilator, so I couldn't speak. And my mouth was completely parched. And as I said, this gagging, sort of clicking sound was the only noise I could make. And there was one nurse between 3 rooms, and she was going around doing her rounds. And as she walked past the door, the entrance to my room, there was every 20 minutes or so, there was like a 2-second window where if she wasn't actually coming into me, I had the opportunity to get her attention. And that feeling of vulnerability,
Helplessness.
oh,
Yeah.
it was horrendous, you know? So, I think, you know, it was very much like a baby in some ways in terms of that helplessness, but with the mind of an adult and the awareness of what I was experiencing. And so you have to go and learn ways to go inwards, and there's a mental battle there, and there's
Yeah.
and so on, and find ways to process this or to put your mind to work. And I think we're capable of dealing with more than we give ourselves credit for.